The February morning was bitter cold, the kind that makes your breath freeze in your chest and turns the ground hard as concrete. Tom Rodriguez had been up since 4:30, same as every morning for the past 20 years. His routine never changed: coffee black, check the weather, load the truck with hay bales, and drive the back roads to check on his cattle scattered across 300 acres of Colorado rangeland. Tom wasn't much for talking. His neighbors knew him as the guy who nodded hello at the feed store and paid his bills on time. He'd lived alone on the ranch since his father passed 5 years ago. Just him and his 12 head of cattle, 2 border collies, and an old pickup truck that had seen better decades. Most folks in town figured he was just shy, but the truth was simpler. Tom had learned early that words didn't fix much, but actions could change everything. That morning started like any other. He was driving slowly along County Road 47, scanning the fence lines for breaks or problems, when something caught his eye near the old Henderson property. The place had been empty for 2 years now, ever since old Mrs. Henderson moved to town. From a distance, it looked like someone had dumped trash by the fence post. Tom pulled his truck to the side of the gravel road and squinted through the windshield. What he saw made his stomach drop. It wasn't trash. It was a horse. A mare barely standing, tied to the fence post with a piece of yellow rope. Even from 50 yards away, Tom could see her ribs poking through what was left of her winter coat. Her head hung so low it nearly touched the frozen ground. Tom shut off the engine and stepped out into the biting wind. The silence was complete except for the crunch of his boots on the frost-covered grass. As he got closer, the full picture came into focus, and it was worse than he'd imagined. The mare was a chestnut, or had been once. Now her coat was dull and patchy, with bare spots where the hair had rubbed off or fallen out. Her hip bones jutted out like mountain peaks, and her neck was so thin it looked like it might snap under the weight of her head. But what made Tom's hands clench into fists was the cardboard sign hanging around her neck. Someone had taken a piece of brown cardboard, maybe from a shipping box, and written in black marker, "Hopeless mouth, free to good home." The letters were uneven, like they'd been written in a hurry or by someone who didn't much care about neatness. Tom approached slowly, talking in the soft voice he used with frightened cattle. "Easy, girl, easy now." The mare didn't even lift her head. Up close he could see why someone had labeled her mouth as hopeless. Her lips were scarred and twisted, probably from years of harsh bits and rough handling. Dried blood crusted around her muzzle, and when she tried to shift her weight, Tom noticed she had trouble moving her jaw properly. There was a small pile of hay on the ground near her feet, but it was clear she couldn't eat it. The grass around the post was trampled in a tight circle where she'd been walking, probably for hours or maybe days. A blue plastic bucket lay on its side nearby, empty and cracked. Tom had seen plenty of neglected animals in his 43 years, but this was different. This wasn't just neglect. Someone had given up on this horse completely. They'd driven out here in the middle of nowhere and left her to die, with a sign that basically said she wasn't worth saving. He walked around the mare slowly, taking in every detail. She was young, maybe 8 or 9 years old based on her build. Under all that neglect and suffering, you could see the bones of a good horse. Her legs were straight and strong, her chest deep. Someone had once cared enough to train her. There were faint marks on her back where a saddle had rested for years. The rope around her neck was tied too tight, cutting into her skin. Tom pulled out his pocket knife and carefully cut through it, speaking softly the whole time. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore, girl. Nobody's going to leave you tied up like this again." When the rope fell away, the mare lifted her head for the first time. Her eyes were brown, big and dark, but they held no hope. She looked at Tom with the tired resignation of an animal that had learned not to expect kindness from humans. Tom made his decision in that moment, the same way he made all his decisions, quietly and completely. He didn't think about the cost or the complications or what his neighbors might say. He just knew he couldn't drive away and leave her there. Getting her into his horse trailer took 20 minutes of patient coaxing. The mare could barely walk, and loading into the trailer clearly caused her pain. But she seemed to understand somehow that Tom was trying to help. Maybe it was the tone of his voice, or maybe she was just too tired to fight anymore. The drive to Dr. Martinez's clinic in town usually took 15 minutes. Tom drove it in 25, taking every turn slowly and stopping twice to check on his passenger through the trailer's window. Each time the mare was still standing, swaying with the motion of the trailer but holding on. Dr. Martinez had been the local large animal vet for 30 years. She'd seen everything from prize bulls with broken legs to mustangs brought in from the wild. But when Tom led the mare into her examination barn, even she paused for a moment. "Where did you find her?" Dr. Martinez asked, running expert hands over the mare's neck and shoulders. Tom told her about the fence post and the sign, his words coming out in short, careful sentences. Dr. Martinez nodded as she worked, checking the mare's temperature, listening to her heart, looking at her mouth with a small flashlight. The examination took 40 minutes. Tom stood in the corner, hat in his hands, watching Dr. Martinez's face for clues about what she was finding. The mare stood perfectly still through it all, as if she'd learned long ago that fighting only made things worse. Finally, Dr. Martinez straightened up and looked at Tom with the expression vets get when they have to deliver bad news to people who care about animals. "Tom," she said, "this horse has been through hell." Dr. Martinez pulled off her examination gloves and tossed them in the trash can by the door. Tom could read her face like weather. 30 years of bringing sick cattle to this clinic had taught him that look. It wasn't good news coming. "The mouth damage is extensive," Dr. Martinez said, washing her hands at the small sink in the corner. "Someone used a harsh bit on her for years, probably yanked on it hard when she didn't respond fast enough. The tissue inside her mouth is scarred pretty bad. Her teeth are ground down unevenly, and there's nerve damage affecting how she can chew and swallow." Tom nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the mare. She stood with her head low, breathing shallow and quick. Every few seconds she'd try to work her jaw like she was testing whether it still hurt. "There's more," Dr. Martinez continued. "She's severely malnourished, probably lost about 200 pounds from her normal weight. Her digestive system has basically shut down from not getting proper nutrition for months, maybe longer." The vet walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a folder, flipping through pages of notes she'd written during the exam. "Her back legs are weak, probably from standing in one position too long while tied up. There's some muscle damage in her hindquarters that might be permanent, and—" She paused, looking at Tom directly. "She's got what we call learned helplessness. She's given up fighting because fighting never helped her before." Tom felt something twist in his chest. He'd seen that look in the mare's eyes. The same look his old dog Rex had before he passed, like all the hope had just drained right out. "Can you fix her?" Tom asked, though he was pretty sure he already knew the answer. Dr. Martinez sat down on a hay bale and rubbed her forehead. She'd been working since dawn, and it was already past noon. "Tom, I'm going to be straight with you. This horse needs surgery on her mouth to repair some of the damage. She needs dental work. She needs weeks, maybe months of special feeding to get her weight back up. She needs medicine for pain and infection. She needs physical therapy to rebuild her strength." Tom waited. There was more coming. All of that together, we're looking at somewhere around $15,000, maybe more if we run into complications. Dr. Martinez stood up and walked over to the mare, running her hand gently down the horse's neck. "And even with all that, there's no guarantee she'll ever be able to eat normally or be ridden again." The number hit Tom like a punch to the stomach. $15,000. That was more than he made in 6 months from selling cattle. It was more than his truck was worth. It was the kind of money that could break a small ranch operation like his. "Most people in your situation," Dr. Martinez said quietly, "choose to put the horse down. It's not cruel, it's merciful. She suffered enough." Tom stood there in the quiet barn, listening to the mare's labored breathing and the distant sound of traffic on Main Street. He thought about his father, who'd taught him that every living thing deserved a chance. He thought about the sign around her neck calling her hopeless. He thought about driving away and pretending he'd never seen her tied to that fence post. "What would you try first?" Tom asked. Dr. Martinez looked surprised. "You're serious about this?" "What would you try first?" Tom repeated. The vet walked over to her desk and pulled out a different folder, this one thick with research papers and medical journals. "Well, we'd start with pain management and getting her eating again. I've got a colleague up in Denver who specializes in equine mouth surgery. We'd need to get her stable before any surgery could happen." She flipped through the papers, talking more to herself than to Tom. "There's a new technique for feeding horses with severe mouth trauma. Soft mashes mixed with supplements. Has to be done by hand 4 times a day for weeks. Someone would need to be with her almost constantly." Tom nodded. "What else?" "Physical therapy. Gentle walking. Gradually building up her strength. And she'd need someone who understands horses, someone patient. This kind of rehabilitation takes months and there will be setbacks. Days when it seems like she's getting worse instead of better. Dr. Martinez closed the folder and looked at Tom seriously. I have to ask why. Why would you take this on? You don't even know this horse. You could buy 3 healthy horses for what this is going to cost. Tom was quiet for a long moment watching the mare. She had lifted her head slightly and was looking toward the window where afternoon sunlight was streaming through. It was the first time he'd seen her show interest in anything. Because somebody needs to, he said finally. That evening, Tom sat at his kitchen table with his phone in his hands, staring at a number he hadn't called in 2 months. His sister Lucy lived 3 hours away in Boulder, where she worked as a teacher at the elementary school. She was the talker in the family. Where Tom used few words, Lucy used plenty. She'd been after him for years to visit more, to get out of the ranch house, to find himself a wife and start a family. Tom had always figured Lucy worried too much about him living alone. But right now he needed help, and Lucy was the only person he trusted completely. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. Tom, is everything okay? You never call unless something's wrong. Lucy's voice carried that note of concern it always had when he called unexpectedly. I'm fine, Tom said, but I need to ask you something. He told her about finding the mare, about the vet's diagnosis, about the money and the months of care she'd need. Lucy listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. $15,000, Tom? She said when he finished. That's a lot of money for someone you don't know. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? Tom looked out his kitchen window toward the barn where the mare was, resting in a clean stall with fresh water and soft hay she still couldn't eat properly. Dr. Martinez had given her pain medicine and antibiotics, enough to get her through the night. She had a sign around her neck that said hopeless, Tom said. But I don't think she is. Lucy was quiet for a moment. Tom could hear the television in the background at her house, the sound of normal life continuing. What do you need from me? She asked. Help. The feeding has to be done 4 times a day, every day. Dr. Martinez says it takes about an hour each time. I can handle the morning and evening feeds, but I need someone for afternoon and night. Tom, I live 3 hours away. I have a job. I know. Tom took a breath. But you're on spring break next week. And after that, maybe weekends? Another long silence. Tom waited, letting his sister think it through. You really think you can save this horse? I don't know, Tom admitted. But I think she deserves somebody trying. The next morning, Lucy's red Honda Civic pulled into Tom's driveway at 7:30. She got out carrying 2 suitcases and a grocery bag full of what looked like medical supplies. I took a leave of absence, she announced, walking toward the barn without even saying hello. 2 months. Don't argue with me about it. Tom followed her, not arguing. He'd learned a long time ago that when Lucy made up her mind about something, there wasn't much point in discussion. At the barn door, Lucy stopped and stared at the mare in her stall. The horse was standing but swaying slightly, her head still hanging low. Oh my God, Tom, Lucy whispered. What did they do to her? I don't know, Tom said. But we're going to find out if we can fix it. The first week with Lucy helping was harder than Tom had expected. Not because of the work. They'd figured out a schedule that covered all 4 daily feedings. The hard part was watching his sister see what he'd been dealing with alone for those first few days. Lucy tried to hide it, but Tom caught her wiping tears from her eyes after the mare's second feeding attempt failed completely. The horse couldn't manage more than a few bites of the specially prepared mash before her damaged mouth simply gave up. Most of the food ended up on the ground, wasted. She's starving, Tom, Lucy said that evening as they sat on the porch steps, both exhausted. We can't keep enough nutrition in her to make a difference. Tom nodded slowly. He'd been thinking the same thing. Dr. Martinez had warned them about this. The mare's digestive system was so shut down from months of malnutrition that even getting her to eat was only half the battle. Her body had forgotten how to process food properly. Give it more time, Tom said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. The next morning brought their first real crisis. Tom went out for the 6 a.m. feeding and found the mare lying down in her stall, breathing hard and sweating despite the cool morning air. She tried to stand when she heard him coming but couldn't manage it. Tom called Dr. Martinez while Lucy ran to get warm blankets. By the time the vet arrived, they had the mare covered and were taking turns sitting with her, talking softly and checking her breathing every few minutes. Colic, Dr. Martinez said after her examination. Her digestive system is struggling with the changes in diet. We caught it early, but this could happen again. She gave the mare an injection for pain and another to help with digestion, then showed Tom and Lucy how to walk her gently around the paddock every hour to keep things moving internally. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot, Dr. Martinez said as she packed up her equipment. If she makes it through this episode, her system might start adapting. If not, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Tom and Lucy took shifts that night. Every hour, one of them would wake up, check on the mare, and walk her slowly around the small paddock behind the barn. The horse moved like she was walking on glass, each step careful and painful. At 3 a.m, it was Tom's turn. He found the mare standing in her stall, alert and looking toward the door when she heard his footsteps. For the first time in days, she seemed genuinely glad to see him. "Feeling better, girl?" Tom asked, clipping the lead rope to her halter. The walking session went better than any since the colic episode started. The mare's steps were steadier, her breathing more normal. When they got back to the stall, she actually showed interest in the water bucket. By dawn, the crisis had passed. Dr. Martinez arrived for her follow-up visit to find the mare, eating a small portion of mash and keeping it down successfully. "You, too, probably saved her life last night," the vet told them. That kind of round-the-clock care is what makes the difference between horses that recover and horses that don't. But the setbacks kept coming. 3 days later, an infection developed around one of the old wounds in the mare's mouth. Her temperature spiked and she stopped eating again. Dr. Martinez started her on antibiotics and changed her pain medication. But for 5 days, the horse barely touched her food. Lucy was getting frustrated in a way Tom had never seen before. She was used to problems that had clear solutions, lesson plans that needed adjusting, students who needed extra help, classroom supplies that needed organizing. This was different. This was helping something that couldn't tell you what was wrong or what might help. "I don't understand how you've been doing this alone," Lucy said after a particularly difficult afternoon feeding session. She ate maybe 3 bites. 3 bites, Tom. That's not enough to keep a cat alive, let alone a horse. Tom was cleaning the feed bucket, scraping out the mash the mare couldn't eat. Most days, more food hit the ground than went in her mouth. "Some days are better than others," he said. "When are the better days? Because I haven't seen one yet." Tom set down the bucket and looked at his sister. Lucy was tired, really tired. She'd been sleeping on an air mattress in the barn office so she could hear if the mare got into trouble during the night. Her teaching clothes had been replaced by old jeans and boots that were always covered in hay dust and mud. "Yesterday morning she let me touch her neck while she was eating," Tom said. "First time she's done that. That's it? That's a good day?" "For her, yeah. It is." The breakthrough came 2 weeks later, so gradually that Tom almost missed it. He was preparing the morning mash, same routine he'd followed for dozens of mornings, when he noticed the mare was standing at the front of her stall, watching him work. Usually she stayed in the back corner until he brought the food to her. Today she was alert, interested, maybe even eager. Tom carried the feed pan to the stall and set it in the usual spot. Instead of waiting for him to steady it with his hands, the mare immediately put her head down and began eating. Not just nibbling at the edges of the food, but actually eating with something that looked like appetite. "Lucy," Tom called toward the house. "Come here." His sister appeared in the barn doorway, still in her robe and slippers. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, look." Lucy walked over to the stall and watched as the mare continued eating, managing to keep most of the food in her mouth instead of dropping it. "Oh my God, Tom, she's actually eating." "More than that," Tom said. "Look at her ears. Look at her eyes." Lucy studied the mare carefully. The horse's ears were forward, alert and interested. Her eyes, which had been dull and resigned for weeks, held something different. Not quite hope yet, but at least engagement with the world around her. "She's not just surviving anymore," Lucy said quietly. "She's starting to live." The progress came in tiny steps after that. One day the mare finished half her breakfast instead of leaving most of it. The next day she walked to the paddock fence when she saw Tom coming with the halter, instead of waiting to be caught. A week later she nickered softly when Lucy appeared with the afternoon feeding. Each small victory felt enormous. Tom started keeping a notebook, writing down everything: how much she ate, how far she walked, any new behaviors. Dr. Martinez had suggested it as a way to track progress that might be too gradual to notice day by day. The notes told a story of healing so slow it was almost invisible. Day 23, 8:34 of morning mash. Day 27, walked to gate when I called. Day 31, let Lucy brush her neck for 5 minutes. The neighbors started noticing. Bill Henderson, whose property adjoined Tom's on the south side, stopped by one evening while Tom was doing the last feeding of the day. "Heard you took in that horse someone dumped out by the old place," Bill said, leaning against the paddock fence. "Word gets around," Tom replied, not looking up from mixing the mare's dinner. "Folks are talking. Some say you're throwing good money after bad." Bill paused, watching the mare approach the stall door at the sound of Tom's voice. "Others say what you're doing is pretty decent." Tom carried the feed into the stall. The mare waited patiently while he set it down, then immediately began eating. Her movements were still careful, still painful, but there was a steadiness to them now that hadn't been there a month ago. "What do you think?" Tom asked. Bill was quiet for a moment, studying the horse. "I think she looks a hell of a lot better than when you found her. Still got a long way to go, but..." He shrugged. "Sometimes the long way is the only way that works." That night, Lucy found Tom sitting on a hay bale in the barn, just watching the mare rest in her stall. The horse was lying down properly for the first time since they'd brought her home, her legs tucked under her body instead of sprawled out in exhaustion. "Penny for your thoughts," Lucy said, settling beside him. "Just thinking about that sign," Tom said. "The one that said hopeless," Lucy nodded. They'd kept the cardboard sign, though neither of them could say why. It was hanging in the tack room now, a reminder of how far they'd all come. "You know what I learned teaching second grade?" Lucy said. "Sometimes the kids everyone thinks are hopeless are just the ones who need more time to figure things out." Tom smiled, the first real smile Lucy had seen from him in weeks. In her stall, the mare lifted her head and looked at them both, her dark eyes calm and trusting. "Maybe she just needed someone to give her that time," Tom said. 6 months had passed since Tom first found the mare tied to that fence post. 6 months of 4 times daily feedings, vet bills that kept piling up, and more sleepless nights than he cared to count. Lucy had moved into the guest bedroom and taken over the afternoon care routine like she'd been doing it her whole life. Between the two of them, they'd developed a system that worked, though some days it felt like they were barely keeping their heads above water. The mare still didn't have a name. Tom wasn't much for naming things until he was sure they'd stick around, and despite all their efforts, he still wasn't certain she'd make it through. Lucy had suggested dozens of names. Ginger for her coat, Brave for her spirit, Lucky for finding them. But Tom just called her Girl, same way he'd been doing since day one. This particular morning started like all the others. Tom was up at 4:30, coffee black, checked the weather forecast on his phone. The October air had a bite to it that promised winter was coming early this year. He pulled on his worn denim jacket and headed out to the barn for the morning feeding. The routine was always the same. Mix the special mash that Dr. Martinez had taught them to make. Senior horse feed soaked in warm water until it was soft as baby food, mixed with supplements and vitamins. Tom would take it to Girl's stall, sit on the upturned bucket beside her, and hold the feed pan while she slowly, carefully ate what she could manage. But when Tom opened the barn door that morning, something was different. Girl was standing at the front of her stall, her head up, ears forward. For the first time in 6 months, she looked alert. Not just awake, but actually interested in what was happening around her. "Well, hello there, Girl," Tom said softly. Same greeting he'd used every morning. But today, instead of barely lifting her head, the mare took a step toward the stall door. Tom mixed her breakfast the usual way, but when he approached the stall, Girl did something she'd never done before. She nickered. It was barely more than a whisper of sound, but it was the first time she'd ever acknowledged his presence with anything other than resignation. Tom set the feed pan in its usual spot and settled onto his bucket. "You're feeling better today, aren't you, Girl?" Instead of waiting for him to hold the pan steady, the mare lowered her head and began eating on her own. Tom sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. For 6 months, every meal had required his hands guiding hers, helping her navigate food to the parts of her mouth that still worked properly. Now she was managing it herself, slowly but steadily. The feed pan wasn't large, maybe the size of a dinner plate. But Tom watched as Girl ate every last bit of the mash. something she'd never been able to do before. When she finished, she lifted her head and looked directly at him. Her brown eyes, which had been dull and lifeless for so long, held something Tom hadn't seen since the day he found her. Hope. Tom stood up slowly and reached out his hand. Girl took a small step forward and touched her nose to his palm, so gently it was barely a whisper of contact. Her breath was warm against his skin. "Lucy's going to flip when she sees this," Tom said, his voice rougher than usual. 20 minutes later, Lucy came rushing into the barn, still in her pajamas and rubber boots, her hair sticking up in every direction. "You said she ate the whole thing? By herself?" Lucy was practically bouncing with excitement. "Every bit," Tom confirmed. Lucy grabbed the empty feed pan and examined it like it held the secrets of the universe. "Tom, do you know what this means? 6 months ago she couldn't eat a handful of grain without help. Dr. Martinez said she might never eat normally again." Tom was leaning against the stall door, watching Girl explore her hay net with renewed interest. "Means we're doing something right, I guess. We need to call Dr. Martinez. She's going to want to see this." Dr. Martinez arrived 2 hours later, her truck pulling into the yard just as Tom was finishing his morning cattle check. She'd been coming out to the ranch every 2 weeks to monitor Girl's progress, and each visit had been guardedly optimistic. The mare was gaining weight, her wounds were healing, but the breakthrough they'd all hoped for had remained elusive. Until now. "I don't believe it," Dr. Martinez said after completing her examination. "Tom, this horse has gained over 200 pounds since you brought her in. Her coat is starting to shine. Her muscle tone is improving. And if what you're telling me about her eating is true, want to see for yourself?" Tom asked. They prepared another small portion of the mash and Tom carried it into the stall. This time Girl didn't wait for him to sit down. She walked over to the feed pan and began eating immediately, her movements more confident than they'd been that morning. Dr. Martinez shook her head slowly. "In 30 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen a turnaround like this. 6 months ago, I would have bet money this horse wouldn't survive the month." "She's tougher than she looks," Lucy said, scratching Girl behind the ears. The mare leaned into the touch, another first. "It's not just toughness," Dr. Martinez replied. "It's the care you two have given her. Most people would have given up months ago when the bills kept climbing and the progress seemed so slow." Tom was quiet, watching Girl finish her meal. The vet was right about the bills. His savings account was empty, and he'd taken out a loan against the ranch to cover the ongoing medical costs. Some nights he lay awake wondering if he'd made the right choice. If Lucy was sacrificing too much to help him, if all their effort was just prolonging the inevitable. But mornings like this made it all worthwhile. Over the next few weeks, Girl's progress accelerated. She began approaching the stall door when Tom and Lucy arrived with her meals. She started showing interest in the activity around the ranch, turning her head to watch when Tom drove the tractor past the barn, nickering when she heard his truck coming up the driveway. The biggest change came on a sunny afternoon in late October. Lucy was in the paddock with Girl, leading her through the gentle walking exercises Dr. Martinez had prescribed. Tom was fixing a broken fence panel nearby, half watching and half focused on his work. Lucy was talking to Girl the way she always did, a steady stream of encouragement and conversation. "That's it, good girl, see that? Your legs are getting stronger every day. Pretty soon you'll be galloping around this paddock like a young horse again." Tom looked up from his fence repair just in time to see Girl do something extraordinary. Instead of walking beside Lucy with her head down, focused on each careful step, the mare lifted her head and walked directly over to Tom. She stopped right in front of him and lowered her head, pressing her forehead against his chest. Tom dropped his hammer and stood perfectly still, feeling the warmth of her breath through his work shirt. "Tom," Lucy called softly from across the paddock. "I think she's saying thank you." Tom reached up and placed his hand on Girl's neck. Her coat was thick and healthy now, a rich chestnut color that caught the afternoon sunlight. Under his palm, he could feel the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, strong and sure. "You don't need to thank me, Girl," Tom said quietly. "You did all the hard work." Word of Girl's recovery spread through the community the way news always does in small towns. Slowly at first, then all at once. Dr. Martinez mentioned it to another rancher during a cattle call. Lucy told her story to the cashier at the grocery store. Tom's feed supplier noticed he'd been buying senior horse feed for months and asked how the rescue was going. Within 2 weeks, Tom's phone was ringing daily. Horse owners from 3 counties away were calling about animals they'd been told were beyond help. A woman from Montana wanted to bring down a 2 years had passed since that bitter February morning when Tom first found the mare tied to the fence post. Now, on a warm spring afternoon, she stood in the same paddock where she'd taken her first shaky steps toward recovery. But everything else had changed. The horse Tom still called Girl had transformed into something beautiful. Her chestnut coat gleamed in the sunshine, thick and healthy. She'd gained back all the weight she'd lost, and then some, her body strong and solid. The scars in her mouth would always be there, and she'd never be able to eat like a normal horse. But she'd learned to manage her special diet with grace. More importantly, she'd found her purpose. It started with the kids from Lucy's school. Lucy had returned to teaching after spending those crucial first months helping with Girl's recovery. But she came out to the ranch every weekend. One Saturday, she brought her friend Beth, another teacher, who had her 2 young children with her. 8-year-old Katie was going through a rough patch. Her parents were getting divorced, and she'd become quiet and withdrawn at school. Her younger brother Danny was the opposite, acting out, getting in trouble, angry at the world. Would it be okay if the kids met Girl? Beth had asked Tom. Katie loves horses, and Lucy told me about everything you've been through with her. Tom wasn't sure how Girl would react to children. She'd grown comfortable with him and Lucy, trusting with Dr. Martinez, but kids were different. They moved quickly, made sudden noises, and had unpredictable energy. But when Katie approached the fence, something magical happened. Girl walked over immediately, lowering her head so the little girl could reach her nose through the rails. Katie stood perfectly still, her hand barely touching the mare's soft muzzle. And for the first time in months, she smiled. She likes me, Katie whispered. She does, Tom agreed. Want to come in and meet her properly? For the next hour, Katie sat on a hay bale in Girl's stall while the mare stood quietly beside her. The child talked about school, about her parents fighting, about being scared and sad. Girl listened to every word, occasionally nuzzling Katie's shoulder or resting her chin gently on the girl's head. Danny, who had been running around the barn causing mischief, gradually grew quiet and came closer. By the end of the visit, he was sitting next to his sister, both children leaning against Girl's warm side while she dozed peacefully. I've never seen Katie so calm, Beth told Tom as they loaded the kids back in the car. It's like that horse understood exactly what she needed. Word spread the way it always does in small communities. Within a month, Tom's phone was ringing with calls from parents, teachers and counselors asking if children could visit Girl. He wasn't running a therapy program. He didn't know anything about that kind of work, but he couldn't say no to kids who needed help. Lucy started, coming out every weekend to help supervise visits. Dr. Martinez donated her time to make sure Girl stayed healthy despite the increased activity. The local feed store owner, Pete Williams, started delivering Girl's special food for free. You're doing something important here, Pete told Tom one afternoon as they unloaded bags of senior feed. My granddaughter came out here last month after her dog died. First time I'd seen her smile in weeks. Tom was uncomfortable with the attention, but he couldn't argue with the results. Girl seemed to thrive on the interaction with children. She was gentle with the shy ones, patient with the anxious ones, and somehow instinctively knew how much energy each child could handle. The breakthrough came when a 10-year-old boy named Ryan visited with his mom. Ryan had been in a car accident that left him using a wheelchair. He was angry about his situation, pushing away everyone who tried to help. I don't want to pet some stupid horse, Ryan announced when his mom brought him to the ranch. Tom didn't argue. He just opened Girl's stall door and let the mare decide for herself. Girl walked over to Ryan's wheelchair and very gently placed her head in his lap. The boy sat frozen for a moment, then slowly raised his hands to touch her neck. Why isn't she scared of my chair? Ryan asked. She knows what it's like to have something wrong with you that other people don't understand, Tom said simply. Ryan stayed for 2 hours that day. He told Girl about the accident, about being different now, about kids at school who stared at him. Girl listened to every word, never moving from beside his wheelchair. When it was time to leave, Ryan looked up at Tom. Can I come back? Anytime, Tom said. Ryan started coming every Saturday. His mom said it was the only thing he looked forward to each week. Other kids began asking if they could come on the same day as Ryan. Soon, Saturday afternoons at the ranch were filled with children of all kinds. some dealing with divorce, others with disabilities, some just needing a quiet place to be themselves. Tom found himself becoming something he'd never expected, a teacher, not the kind who stood in front of a classroom, but the kind who showed kids that being different didn't mean being broken, that healing took time, and that sometimes the best therapy was just sitting quietly with someone who understood. The biggest change came to Tom himself. He'd always been a man of few words, comfortable with solitude. But watching Girl work with the children taught him that silence could be a gift, not avoiding people, but being present with them in a way that didn't require explanations or solutions. Lucy noticed the change first. "You're different now," she told him one evening as they watched Girl graze in the paddock. "More open, maybe," Tom said. "Or maybe I just learned that helping doesn't always mean fixing." The phone calls kept coming, not just from parents now, but from other horse owners. People with animals they'd been told were beyond help, horses with injuries or trauma that made them seem worthless to everyone else. Tom didn't take them all. He wasn't running a rescue operation and he knew his limits. But when the situations were right, when he felt like he and Lucy could make a difference, he said yes. There was the old gelding whose owner had died, leaving him alone and grieving. A young mare with anxiety so severe she couldn't be ridden. A pony who had been abused and couldn't trust humans. Each case taught Tom something new about healing, about patience, about the power of simply refusing to give up on someone. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon in late spring, Tom was cleaning Girl's stall when he heard a car pull into the driveway. He looked up to see a family he didn't recognize, a man, woman, and teenage girl walking toward the barn. "Are you Tom?" the man asked. "I'm David Chen. This is my wife Amy and our daughter Lisa. We heard about what you do here." Lisa was maybe 16, tall and thin with sad eyes that reminded Tom of Girl when he first found her. She hung back while her parents explained that she'd been struggling with depression, had stopped riding the horse she'd loved for years, and wasn't responding to traditional therapy. "We don't know if this will help," Amy said, "but we're willing to try anything." Tom looked at Lisa, then at Girl, who had walked to the front of her stall and was watching the visitors with interest. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" Tom said, nodding toward Girl. For the next hour, Lisa sat in Girl's stall while her parents waited outside. Tom couldn't hear what the teenager was saying, but he could see her shoulders shaking as she cried into Girl's neck. The mare stood perfectly still, occasionally shifting her weight to lean gently against the girl. When Lisa finally emerged from the stall, her eyes were red but clearer than when she'd arrived. "Can I come back tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course," Tom said. Later that evening, Tom was sitting on his porch watching the sunset when Lucy joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "Remember that cardboard sign?" she asked. Tom nodded. They'd kept it all this time, hanging in the tack room as a reminder of how far they'd all come. "I was thinking we should retire it," Lucy said. "Maybe put up something different." The next weekend, with help from some of the kids who regularly visited, they painted a new sign for the barn. It was simple, just like Tom preferred, but the message was clear. Every life has value. Every heart can heal. Every story can have a new beginning. As they hung the sign above Girl's stall, Tom reflected on the journey that had brought them all here. He'd started with one horse that everyone said was hopeless. Now he was part of something bigger, a community of healing that reached children, families, and animals who had lost their way. Girl had taught him that labels don't define destiny. That hopeless is just a word people use when they can't see past the surface. That sometimes the most broken things, when given enough love and time, become the most powerful tools for healing others. Standing in the barn that had become a sanctuary, watching Girl nuzzle a young visitor who'd been afraid of her own shadow just months before, Tom understood something his father had tried to teach him years ago, that the best way to heal your own heart is to help mend someone else's. The mare that had arrived with a sign declaring her hopeless had become hope itself, proving that every ending can be a new beginning, and every act of compassion creates ripples that reach further than we ever imagined possible.